Okay, today's lesson is 4.4, graphing sine and cosine functions. And I'm doing this lesson a little bit differently than what we've done with previous ones, and I'm gearing it a lot towards your assignment in Delta Math. So before we get started, I want you to know some important features about the sine and the cosine functions. So first off, this is what they look like. Y'all seen these before. They look very similar, and they are very similar. They go on forever and ever in both directions. And one of the things to know is that both of these functions are periodic. And what that means is that there is what you call a cycle or a period. And that means you can take one piece of the function, and if you were to isolate that piece and slide it over left or right, it would match exactly another part of the function. So if I started here and then I cut off this piece, I could slide it over and it would match exactly with that piece. So I know y'all talked about that last year. Okay, so what is similar about the sine and cosine functions? They both have the same domain and they both have the same range. Okay, what is different is that the y-intercept of the sine function is 0 and the y-intercept of the cosine function is, I missed that t. The y-intercept of the cosine function is 1. And what that means, y'all, that's kind of what we think of as a starting point, okay, for both of those. So you're going to hear me talk about where does it start. So that's a really key piece of information that you remember, that the sine function starts at 0, and that means at 0, it's 0. And the cosine function starts, it says 1, but it's really a max of this function, and you'll see as we keep going. The other thing to remember, we've talked about symmetry. The sine function has origin symmetry and is an odd function. Cosine function has y-axis symmetry, is an even function, and we talk about that a little bit more when we get into our properties. Now, when you're graphing these, okay, what you need to remember is that there are 5 key points, okay? And what those key points are, as I said, I'm always going to talk about the start and stop, or one period of the function. So the sine starts at a 0, and a period is when it starts to repeat. So it always starts and stops at the same spot. So the sine starts at 0, ends at 0, halfway between is a 0. Halfway between the first two, it goes up. Halfway between the last two, it goes down. Cosine, on the other hand, starts at a max and therefore ends at a max. Halfway between the maxes are mins, and halfway between the max and min are the zeros. Okay, so you're going to hear me say that when you talk about it, and if you will follow that, it makes the graphing really easy, especially in Delta Math. So, and I forgot to mention before, if you don't remember from last year, your period is basically the horizontal length of a cycle. So you find where it starts and you go where it stops, and that's what we're going to be doing to find out how long a period is. Okay, we're also going to write the equations of graphs. So to review that with you quickly, we have y equals a sine b times parentheses x minus c plus d, or the same thing with the cosine. The absolute value of a is your amplitude. Now, amplitude, y'all, if you don't remember, is the distance. This is, and I didn't say it here, but this is your midline, because this is the line that's in the middle of the graph. Half of it goes above it, and half of it goes below it. But the amplitude is basically, I should write this down for you. Okay, the amplitude is your, wrong color, my bad. Let's go with this. Amplitude is max minus the min divided by 2. Well, y'all, if you take the max, which is bigger than the min, and you subtract, you will always get a positive number. So it doesn't matter if there's a negative sign in front of your equation, just remember that amplitude is always positive. Okay? Your period is related with 2 pi over b. Okay, b is that coefficient of x. Your phase shift is c. And one of the things, the reason this is in parentheses, because you can only tell that phase shift of c if the coefficient of x is 1. So you have to factor anything out if you have something. Okay, your vertical shift is d. Frequency is how many cycles you have in a period. So it's basically 1 over your period. So in this case, b over 2 pi. Your midline is always an equation. And so it's y equals d. Okay, so now we are going to go work through the problems that you're going to have for homework. And I would honestly suggest watch this part of the video, pause the video, go work those problems, then start the back. Delta Math's going to keep the place where the video is, so it'll be really easy for you to get through this. Okay, so the first thing we're doing is determining the max and min from a trig equation. Okay, and what you need to remember is the minimum. When you're looking at an equation, your minimum is always going to be d minus a, and your max is going to be d plus a. So the number in front of your trig function, if I have f of x equals 10 sine 2/3 x, the number in front is your a value, and I don't have anything here. So since I don't have anything here, my d is going to be 0 in this case. So if that is the case, that means your minimum is going to be minus 10 and your max is going to be plus 10. Okay, look at 1b. Same thing, minimum d minus a, maximum is d plus a. A is the number in front, d is the number at the end being added to it. So 6 minus 8 is negative 2, 6 plus 8 is 14. So pause, go do those problems, and then come back. All right, number 2. Number 2 says determine the period. Okay, the period of your function, okay, as I just mentioned earlier, is 2 pi over b. So I have to, b is the coefficient of my x. So 2 pi over 8 simplifies. Okay, and y'all, when I talk about putting this in class calc, you're just simplifying that. If you're simplifying that in class calc, just leave the pi off, put 2 over 8, and then put the pi back in for your answer. So the answer is going to be pi over 4. Okay, what may be challenging is the second type of problem, and that is because my b value is actually a fraction. I don't know why I didn't write that up here. Okay, so my b value here is 3 pi over 2. So if it is 3 pi over 2, y'all, when you divide by a fraction, you simplify that by multiplying by the reciprocal. So 2 pi over b is going to be 2 pi multiplied by the reciprocal of b. And when you simplify that, you get 4/3. Okay, again, pause the video, go work those problems, and then come back. Okay, graphing sine and cosine. So this time we're actually going to have to graph, and I'm going to tell you the way they have it. I kind of like the way he does it, and it follows along with those 5 key points that I was going to tell you, because he tells you that you have to plot at least 5 points. You can see that over here on this, okay, because I kind of went further. Okay, so first off, you're going to get an equation. Okay, and you want to identify that equation. This says y equals 6 cosine 2x minus 3. So 6 is a, 2 is b, and 3 is, or negative 3 is my d value. Okay, and we just talked about how do you find the minimum, and that is d minus a. In this case is going to be negative 3 minus 6, which is negative 9, and your max is going to be d plus a, which is negative 3 plus 6, or 3. Now, the reason you have to find this, because you're going to go put a number in right here, and basically I would always put 1 if these numbers are between 10 and negative 10. So if I go put a 1 because they are, then my graph is going to look like this right here. And so what's happening is you're labeling your y-axis. That's what it's doing. So only if, when you do these for the problem, if these two numbers are not between 10 and negative 10, then you might change that to 2. So you'll be between negative 20 and 20. So that's why you need to do that. The first thing you always do when you graph, y'all, is you label your x and y axis. So this is how it's done in Delta Math. Okay. The next thing you always want to do is find your period. And my period is going to be 2 pi over b, which is 2 pi over 2, and that simplifies to pi. So that is what I'm going to put in here. And once you put these two things in, you click done. And your graph is going to label the y-axis, and it's going to label the x-axis. On the x-axis over here, it's going to put, in this particular case, it's going to put pi right here. And what you'll do is you'll actually go drag that to wherever you want to. You can leave it there if you want to, but if you do it along with my 5 key points, then the easiest thing to do is to drag that dot to the 4th tick mark. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So you want to drag it to right here. That's supposed to be the 4th tick mark. Okay. And then what you actually do here to graph it is you just have to plot 5 points. So how you do that, all right, I got the cosine, and as we just said, cosine starts at a max, okay? So I would normally go up here to 1, but it starts at a max. And actually, before I say that, y'all, you always, really the first place you want to start is with D. So I'm going to go down 3. 1, 2, 3. So that means this right here is my midline right there. Okay, that's -3. So when I go down there, and now cosine starts at a max, which would normally be up 1, but my amplitude is 6. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to put my dot right there. Okay, and then on the 4th tick mark, I'm going to put it at the same place. And then halfway between, it goes to a min. So I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And put it there. And then halfway between those two are the zeros, which is where that midline is. And when you plot that 5th point, delta math is going to connect the graph. And then you just say, I'm done. That's all you got to do. Okay, let's look at this one. Y equals -7 times the sine of 1/4 x plus 2. So A is -7. The amplitude is 7, but your A value is -7. Okay, B is 1/4 and D is 2. Okay, so when I go find my max and my min is D minus A, so that's going to be 2 minus 7, which is -5. My max is going to be 2 plus 7, which is going to be 9. Those numbers are between 10 and -10, so that's why my graph is labeled as such. The next thing you always have to find out is your period, and my period is 2 pi over b. And remember I said if you have a fraction, just go ahead and multiply by the reciprocal. So 2 pi times 4 over 1 is 8 pi. So it's going to label this as 8 pi. Okay? Okay, so then I'm going to move my point over here. I'm going to drag it over to the 4th tick mark. So I need a color here. My bad. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4. That's where I would drag. That's where you're going to drag that point to. But to start graphing, I need to find my midline. And my midline, so I'm always going to start with that D. So this is 2. And so I'm on the sine graph, and the sine graph starts at 0. So I would start at 2, and I'm going to put my dot, and it ends at 2, and halfway between is a 2. And halfway between the first two, I'm going to go up whatever my amplitude is. Well, the difference here is it has a -7. So instead of going up, I'm going to go down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3. Well, I can know it goes to 9 because we already figured out it was going to go to 9. But anyway, you can count the graph. So once you plot that point, then it'll graph it for you, and you'll see that it's correct, and then you're good to go. But those are your 5 key points that you need. So again, pause, go do some of those, then come back. All right, number 4, write trig functions given certain features. Okay, so the first one that we have says write a cosine function. So if I'm going to write a cosine function, it's going to look something like this. Y equals A times the cosine of bx plus d. Because they're not putting any phase shifts in here for you. How nice. So midline is whatever that midline is, that's my D. My amplitude is A, and my period I'm going to figure out by setting 2 pi over b equal to it. And that's like over 1. So when you cross multiply, you get 2 pi equals b pi. Well, I'm hoping y'all can see that if I just cross out my pi's, my b is 2. So my function is going to be a comes first, that's 5. And then we already knew it was cosine because they told us you got to pay attention. And then b is 2. So I'm going to have 2x, and then I'm going to have my midline of plus 2. Now, y'all have to pay attention. There's times, and he'll tell you that you might need parentheses around that. So, and actually, I think the next one we did that. Okay, so the next one, again, I have a cosine function. My amplitude is a. Well, that's enough to say I'm going to have 2 times the cosine of something. My midline is 3. That's my d. That's going to be over here at the end. And my period is 7 pi over 5. So 2 pi over b equals 7 pi over 5. If I cross multiply, I get 2 pi times the reciprocal, because that was the other way that I told you to do it. So when you do that, you can see that, again, there's a pi on the top, and then cross out the whole thing. Pi on the top and a pi on the bottom, which leaves 10 pi over 7. And that's your b value. And that's all you got. So that's the 4th item. Here comes the 5th item. Pause, go do those problems, and then come do number 5. All right, features from the graph. You got to pay attention to these directions. I think there's only 2 types of problems. You got to find the equation in the midline, or you're going to be finding the period. All right, the equation in the midline is y equals, got to have y equals the max plus the min over 2. So the max in my graph is 3. The min in my graph is -5. So 3 plus -5 is -2. Divided by 2 is y equals -1. You will miss this problem if you don't put y equals. So pay attention to that. Okay, the period. This might be a little challenging for y'all, but to find the period from a graph, y'all, you've got multiple ways of doing it. Okay, you can either go from a max to a max. So the max to a max would be, where's the max? A max is here. That's a max. It's a bad dot. Let's try that again. There to there, which is basically 3 pi minus 3 pi over 5. Or you can go from a min to a min. So that would be from this point to that point, which is going to be 21 pi over 5 minus 9 pi over 5. Or you can go from a 0 to a 0, but you've got to make sure those points are going in the same direction. So it would be here, would be 1, but you cannot choose this one because those y values are not going in the same direction, so you would go to this one. And that actually is the easiest one because that's going to be 12 pi over 5 minus 0. I've done a lot of problems, and all of his start, because he doesn't have any phase shifts, they're either going to start at 0 or they're going to start at the max or min. So it's easiest to find it by subtracting 0. So if you figure out when this is a full period, you'll have your answer. So in this case, it's 12 pi over 5. Okay, last 2 problems. These are the same, but this is what you call a discovery. And the nice thing about the discovery, y'all, when you see it, okay, this is like the parent function of the graph, and the dotted one is what you're trying to get to, okay? And so this is great practice before you have to go do these down here. So he tells you, write a function of the trigonometric graph, try whole numbers or unit fractions for the value next to x. Okay, he tells you that on the first time. He does not tell you all the time. So remember the a value, okay, is right here. And I told you the a value, go away, come back here. I just want the a. All right, the a value is the amplitude. That is the max minus the min divided by 2. Well, my maximum value is 2. My minimum value is -4. So max minus the min divided by 2 is going to be 3. Okay, so be careful about that. Max minus the min. Okay, the next one that's really pretty easy to find is your midline, which is your d value. Okay, and that is if you look at the max to the min. Okay, on a graph, people don't tend to have a hard time finding it, but if you want to just use the numbers, it is always max plus the min divided by 2. And that gives us -1. Okay. Now, the midline is where you're going to figure out, well, they tell you it's sine, but they're not going to tell you down here. So if you look at it, if you go back to the y-axis to your intercept, that's a 0. It crosses at that point, and sine starts at a 0. So that's how you know that this is a sine graph. Okay. So keep that in mind. Sine graph starts at 0, and that starting point is wherever your midline is. Okay. So the last thing we have to do is figure out what the period is. So when you figure out the period, remember I told you to find that starting point, which is your y-intercept, and go to the next one. Has to be in the same direction. So you're going to go all the way to here. So that means that my period goes from there to there, and that is pi units for my graph. That is equal to 2 pi over b. So if you cross multiply, then you can see that your pi values go away, and b is equal to 2. So what's going to go there is 2. And so when you put those numbers in, y'all, and you click try, you'll see the parent function go into that, and you will see that you have the correct answer. But you won't on these last ones. But let's go do this next one. So I was going to tell you another way of doing it. So this is basically relying strictly on the formulas. Amplitude is max minus the min divided by 2. Midline is max plus the min divided by 2. Some people like to look at the graph and they can see that this clearly is my midline. So that's my D value. And they go put that in. That's my D. Okay. And then from the midline, you can go up or you can go down, but that's your A value. And how far up did I go from D to get up to the max? I went 2 units. Okay. And then again, cosine starts at a max. So I'm looking at this point right here on my graph. And I'm going to go to the next one, which is right here on my graph. That is my period. And my period is 2 pi. That's equal to 2 pi over b. Well, that means that b has to be 1. And that's our function. Okay? So you can pause if you want. I'm going to do the last two because you don't have... you don't know whether it's sine or cosine, so just reviewing that again. All right, so this is trig equation from the graph. And the first thing you might do is go look and see where it starts. So that means where is its y-intercept? Is it at a 0 or is it at a max? And it starts at a max. And since it starts at a max, then I know that my function is going to be a cosine function. Okay? So I'm going to go look for A, B, and D in my problem. All right, as I just said, D is the midline, and you can see on here if, whichever one, doesn't matter which one, there is a max and there is a min, and halfway between is my midline. So that's my D value. And then from that midline to go up or to go down, I generally go up, is A, so that's 2. So I'm going to have y equals 2 times the cosine, and then I'm going to have minus 2 because that's where my D is. Well, that's just dandy because it's not minus 2, is it? It's actually minus 3. Okay. Let's try to make that a little bit minus 3. Okay. And my cosine, I'm looking for, remember I said it starts at a max. So where it goes to a max again, that is my period. And that is 10 pi over 3. So my period is 10 pi over 3. That's equal to 2 pi over b. If you cross multiply, then my pi's are going to cancel out. So b is equal to 6 over 10, and that reduces to 3 over 5. And most likely delta math, because it's got that division, and it's going to make you put parentheses in there. Okay? Last problem, write the equation of the graph. So when I'm looking at it, okay, this is my y-intercept. That's my starting point. I've got to go in the same direction, so I can't use that one, and I'm going to use this point. But that means this thing is starting at a 0, so that means that my equation is going to be sine and not cosine. So those are also my midline, where I have that. That is my midline. That's my D value, which in this case is 2, so I'm going to have plus 2. I know that I'm going to have y equals, what's my A? This is my A value. And so A in this case, I go up 3. So y equals 3 times the sine. And now how far did I go from 0 to a 0? That is 6 pi. So 6 pi is equal to 2 pi over b. Cross multiply, my pi's go away, and so b is equal to 1/3 x. And again, I think delta math is going to make you put parentheses around that. So that's what you have about trig functions and graphing them, and I hope that step-by-step helps and makes it easy for you. Please don't hesitate to contact us or come see us if you have any questions. Thank you so much for watching, and y'all have a great day. Bye.